Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, welcome back if you're a returning viewer or subscriber. Today's video is going to be a big book unhaul. I have brought a lot of books into my life over the last few months, and there haven't been a lot that have been leaving my shelves, which means that they're getting pretty full. So I had to clear out and I got rid of a bunch of books. In general, I have a rule where if I rate a book either 3 stars or even 3.5 stars or less, then is leaving. I just don't have the space. Plus it actually works out because I want my shelves to be very curated and to only hold on to my favourites. So when you look at my bookshelves, you can see so many books that I really loved and adored. This video is kind of long overdue, so I do have quite a few books to share with you, so I feel like we should just get into it. A lot of these I don't have with me because A, they've gone to the charity shop, or B, they have sold on Vinted or Depop. I will have my Vinted and my Depop link down below in case anyone's interested in purchasing any of the books that I do still have with me. I try and keep them up for quite a few months before I pass them on to the charity shop in case anyone's interested, but I do have about probably just under half of the books I'm going to be mentioning today in physical form. The rest of them I'll pop up a picture on the screen. So first book is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This is a book that I read last year and I gave 3 stars. I liked it, I didn't love it, I didn't really connect with it. I have a kind of mixed relationship with Emily Henry's books, so 3 stars is actually quite pleasant for me. But I still passed that one on to the charity shop, I believe. Yeah, it was good, it just wasn't great. It was about these 2 kind of work rivals, a forced proximity romance book, very cleverly written. I don't have any qualms with writing or the storyline or whatever, it just didn't ring true for me. And that's completely fine because there are other Emily Henry books that I love, such as You On My Vacation and Happy Place. So I've kept hold of those and passed this one on to someone else. I have Station 11, which is another book I read last year. This is a book I actually ended up DNFing. This is really sad actually because this was a gift from someone and I really wanted to love it. Plus it's really, really well loved within the kind of book community or within like anybody picking up a book, because this one kind of does reach outside people who binge books as much as us internet book people do. This is like a dystopian book that is heavily focused on a pandemic. It was written I think in 2014. Really interesting because a lot of this does mirror the 2020 pandemic. I went into this book thinking I'd be completely fine reading that sort of subject matter, but it turns out that I'm not. So I did pass this one on to someone else as well. I'm sure someone's going to gobble it up. I'm just not far enough away from 2020 in order to consume pandemic content, so yes, I wouldn't not recommend this to people. I would say be a bit wary in case that sort of subject matter does upset you because it is very heavily focused on that, obviously. Plus I believe when I picked this book up there were rumours of another pandemic on the horizon, which I think has quieted down a little bit now, but the pandemic in Station 11 was one that basically wiped out like 99% of the world population, so it was much scarier than COVID. With the idea of another pandemic potentially worse in real life, I just couldn't really handle it. I've unhauled Belladonna by Adalyn Grace, which is a kind of Regency, I guess it's romantasy, but it's just like a YA fantasy book. This is really well loved by a lot of people, but for me, I just found it was kind of mid. I gave it 3 stars. It wasn't bad by any means, but it also wasn't anything I particularly loved either. The storyline's pretty bizarre. It's about this girl who falls in love with death personified, but it's set amongst this kind of like mystery backdrop. It was very highly atmospheric, which I did really enjoy about it. It's set in this very gothic looking house. I really liked the way it was written, like the tone, but I think there was just some things that I found a bit strange. Once again, I just didn't love it enough to hold on to it. I unhauled Love in Other Words. I have mentioned this book a couple of times on this channel. I don't have to say I hated something, but I hated this book. This was just not for me. I actually can't understand how it's for anybody, but I know there's a lot of people that would call this book like their favourite book of all time. YA romance book, contemporary romance book, that focuses on these 2 people who were best friends growing up and they actually started a relationship in their youth, and then something went wrong and then years down the line they run into each other again. In the present timeline you're like flashing back to the past to figure out what happened that caused them to drift apart or like to completely sever their ties and never want to see each other again. The thing that happened in the past I felt like was so unforgivable, and the way it was handled in the future, or not even handled. There were no apologies, particularly the mailman character. I really, really hated him by the end, to be honest with you. I just thought that what he did was so unacceptable and I would never see him again if he'd done that thing to me. I know there's some speculation about like what was happening with him, but the authors weren't explicit about that, so I don't think it's fair to kind of like create excuses for him when that was not the point of the novel. I could go into that so much. I gave it 2 stars. It's realistically like a 1 or a 1.5, but yeah, obviously wanted it off my shelves, and I sold that one actually on Depop and someone really happily bought it from me because I had a US edition. I unhauled a book called The Last Place You Look. I think it was by Kristen, lepionka perhaps. This was a book I was sent kind of like unsolicited a little while ago. It's a thriller, and I don't read a lot of thrillers, one a year max, so I decided that this one was one that I was probably never going to get to, which is the reason why I passed it on. The kind of contents of it were like not really what I was interested in, particularly when I don't read a lot from that genre. Okay, I promised you we're going to get to books that I actually own physically, but I'm going in order of when I decided to unhaul them, so most of these I've actually passed on already. Crown of Coral and Pearl by Mara Rutherford. Can't even say that. I think this might have been a 3.5 star read actually, perhaps a 3. Yeah, this was really good, really unique YA fantasy book. If you're kind of getting a bit dogged down by that genre, if you feel like you've read it all, then I think this is actually a really good place to go to if you are still of a YA reading age. I'm finding with myself that because of the age I am, I'm 26, like I'm not really connecting with YA books as much as I did obviously when I was like a young adult, which is completely fair enough and also completely fine because there's plenty of adult books that are out there, and I still do like the odd YA book, but it has to kind of like work in every single area. It has to be like well written, a really interesting plot, really interesting characters, and I feel like this book fell flat in some areas. The place it really did exceed itself, or exceed my expectations for it, was in the plots. It's about this girl who lives in this very unique world. She lives on like these stilt houses. They live on the water every however many years. The prettiest girl in her village is taken to the kingdom, which is across the sea or the river or the lake or whatever it may be, and they don't know anything about this kingdom, only that the girl will be taken to marry the prince, or that's what they're told. The main character we follow is a twin, and her twin sister is the prettiest girl because our main character has a scar across her face that makes her unbeautiful, or less beautiful than her sister. I think her sister is in love with someone in the village, so doesn't want to go to marry someone else obviously. So the main character takes her place and travels to this kingdom and finds that things are not as they seem. Really, really strong concept. I just didn't enjoy it enough to keep. Essentially. There's nothing wrong with it though. I unhauled Calypso by sedaris. This is a book that I DNF'd last year. It was like meant to be this kind of comedic memoir book, and I just didn't get on with his style of humour, which was a bit of a shame considering that was like essentially the entire point of the book. And it talks about a lot of really dark topics, like the sudden death of his sister was told in this kind of like humorous way. It was this dark humour, but also this way of, I guess, kind of coping with the circumstances of the situation. Because I didn't get on with his writing style, essentially, I didn't find that I could connect with the book, empathise and sympathise with his situations because of the way they were delivered. So yeah, I didn't have to and then pass this on to the charity shop, which is where I got it from originally. The first book we own physically is Truly Devious by Maureen. This is a YA dark academia mystery book. I really enjoyed this. I thought this was really fun. I read it back in October or something like that, and I had a really fun time with it. But I've always felt that if I enjoyed this book, I'd want to get rid of the hardcover and purchase the paperback because I don't like having hardcovers. I only got this one because it was cheaper than the paperback on Amazon like many years ago when I originally bought it. I don't know whether I'm going to continue this. I've heard that the audiobooks of the series are really good, so I feel like I might just read the rest of the books through audio, or maybe I'll just read them on Kindle or something like that, because I just don't feel like I need to own this series. I had a fun time with this first book, but I feel like it is a little bit annoying because essentially we're following this mystery where our main character Stevie Bell is investigating this cold case that occurred at her dark academia style school many years in the past. But the thing is with this series is that the mystery is not solved at the end of book 1, it is solved at the end of like book 4 or something like that. This has a pretty unsatisfying ending, and the idea of that happening for another 2 books before we finally get a conclusion is slightly frustrating. Like I feel like we got 0 answers in this book, just more questions, which instead of making me want to read on made me just kind of annoyed at the concept of this. So I'm gonna get rid of this hardcover for sure, but still up in the air as to whether I will continue the series. I read Eileen in December of 2024 and I liked this, but I feel like there was a lot about it that I didn't like. This follows our main character who is having a very bad time of it, very, very depressed. She lives a really awful life. It's classic moshfegh in that it's very kind of grotesque in parts and kind of crazy in this way that's meant to shock you, but I didn't find these things interesting enough for the level of unenjoyment I had reading this. It's like a deliberate unenjoyment. You're not meant to be having the best time while reading the moshfegh's books, but I just felt like the twist at the end was not enough to carry through how much of a build-up there was to it and how much I didn't really enjoy what I was consuming. I feel like moshfegh might not be the author for me because I've just had such a mixed experience with her books and most of them have been kind of bad. I read My Year of Rest and Relaxation, which I also unhauled because I feel like that was just massively, I don't know how to say this, but like overhyped. I feel like people blow that book out of proportion. Then I read Blackwell, which I loved. That was such a good book. For me, that's by far her most disgusting, but also her most complex, really, really interestingly kind of plotted and the really fascinating characters and everything like that, and so many good commentaries on the world we live in today as well as the past. That's fantastic. So I gave that one 4 stars, and then this one was a 2. So I'm kind of hesitant to pick up more moshfegh, but I feel like I do want to read the rest of her backlist in order to discover if there's anything that does work for me and it's not just like Lepionka being a one-hit wonder. Or perhaps like because Blackwell is her most recent piece, that's because she is improving as she goes. But Eileen, I think, was her debut, and it wasn't for me. Getting Rid of Snow Country by Yasunari Kawabata. This is a Japanese translation fiction, modern classic, as you can see. This cover's so fun. I should put it in HMV, I think. I was really excited. I felt like the concept was fantastic, but this was such a bad book. Oh my gosh. I think I gave it 1.5 stars, which I think is crazy for a classic, because the thing that made them a classic is some, I'll say this again, but like a commentary on something in our past that kind of still lingers today. But I didn't find there was enough worth in that to justify the other events that happen in this novel. This was really, really boring, for one. And for 2, weird and unsettling, and the main character was really creepy in parts. It's about his relationship with these 2 women who he just plays. It's very kind of tragic. This is a crazy tragic event at the end of it. I didn't enjoy this one bit. So yeah, I haven't actually spoken about this a lot because I need to film my wrap up on it. I didn't film a January wrap up because I only read 3 books, but one of them was this. So you'll hear my thoughts in my February wrap up where I'm going to do like a mashup of January and February's reads. Summer Crossing by Truman Capote. This is another modern classic book that I just found really boring. I feel like this is a kind of an unfair representation of my experience with working on modern classics, because in general I do really, really enjoy them. They're actually some of my favourite books ever. I really like Capote's work as well, but this one didn't work for me. Also, it's very clearly his debut, and it's a book that he never intended to publish, but it was published posthumously. I don't really like the idea of that. I think it's kind of icky when an author's kind of like specifically express how they don't want anyone to see this writing, and then once they've passed on, people ignore that wish. I unhauled Batman Nightwalker by Maureen. I didn't like this book at the time. I read it years and years ago. I've had it on my shelves because I actually don't even know why, but I think I gave it 3.5, but realistically I think it would be about 2.5 if I had read it nowadays. This is in this series of DC icons. A bunch of popular authors of the time wrote these YA renditions of DC stories. So we've got Batman, Catwoman, Wonder Woman, I think there's Superman as well. I have read Batman and Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman was fantastic. That was a 3.5 star read, but potentially a 4 on a reread, and I'm definitely holding on to that copy for now. The audiobook of that was also fantastic, and I think it's free on Spotify if anyone's interested. But Batman was not good. Some of it was actually really scary, but I just didn't like the author's writing style, and I don't really fancy picking up anything more from Maureen just based on this, because it just didn't work for me, and I don't know why it was on my shelves for so many years, considering that I didn't like it at all. I own Catwoman, and I will probably end up reading Superman just to complete the quartet. I unhauled my copy of The Assassin's Blade, and I'm going to be unhauling my copy of Throne of Glass. These are the US editions, but like the original US editions. And because you can't get the latter books of the series in these editions, I'm collecting the new US paperbacks simply because I prefer them over the UK ones. I do own The Assassin's Blade and Throne of Glass in the new editions. So what I'm doing is just transferring my annotations over, and then I'm going to get rid of Throne of Glass. But The Assassin's Blade sold to someone on Depop. They were so excited to receive it. It was honestly so sweet. And yeah, I just don't love this series enough to own multiple editions of these books. Like in general, I don't really like having multiple editions unless it's like a special edition. Like I have the collector's edition of Akatar and stuff like that. Anyway, my favourite books in this series come later on, so this is going to be leaving my shelves as soon as I finished transferring annotations. I've got a way to go, but this will be up on my Depop /eBay /Vinted if you want it. I will obviously be marking it up because I know these books go for an obscene amount sometimes, but I won't be charging like some extreme amount for it either. The Vanishing Half. This is another book that you won't have heard me talk about because I finished it this month. I read this mostly via audiobook, and it was a fantastic audiobook. I'm actually curating a list of my favourite audiobooks of all time to share with you in a video. This one is definitely like somewhere near the top because it was brilliant. It was so well narrated. The narrator kind of put on accents for each of the characters. It was just such an immersive experience. It really took me back to this era and this like area of the US as well. I'm not going to talk about this a lot because I do want to go into my thoughts in my wrap up, obviously. The Vanishing Half follows these 2 twin sisters. I think they're in Louisiana, and they both leave this town to kind of live better lives than themselves. While they're away, they split off. The sisters are black, but they have very light skin, so one decides to pass as white and the other decides to go back home in the community and live as a black woman. It's a fascinating story. It's so interesting. There was so much that was explored here, which was both a good thing and a bad thing, because my complaint with the book is that I feel like it was over ambitious. This was 3.5 stars. I got it from the charity shop, and it's got kind of like stained pages and like a really cracked spine, so if I was going to own this, I would repurchase this in a different edition. But anyway, I don't think I need it because, like I said, the audiobook was the best way to consume that story in my opinion. And then lastly, we have 2 books I'm kind of considering getting rid of, but I feel like I'm probably going to. I might do one more reread before I do, but we have Milk and Honey and we have The Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi Kaur. Contemporary poetry books, obviously everyone's heard of them. I used to write a lot of poetry. I kind of slipped off it, but I definitely need to get back into it actually. Definitely not this kind of style, but I did like having these books because I love the concept behind the poems more than the poems themselves, and that's the reason why I kind of tabbed some of this, and I have it actually underlined. I'm not sure whether I'm going to get rid of these. This one is definitely better than this, but both of them are not great, not my kind of style of poetry. This one is very kind of sun damaged. If you see, that's what it should look like, because I used to keep these on my windowsill. I'm thinking of getting rid of a lot of my contemporary poetry. I own, what is it, Flux? I'm thinking of rereading that one and then passing that one as well, because as beautiful as these are, I just don't need them, and I know that other people would enjoy them more than me. I don't want to keep books because they fulfill some sort of idea on my shelves. They have a beautiful cover, or they are trendy or whatever, so I just don't want to be that kind of person. So I'm going to pass these on to someone else, most likely, but might do one more reread. I've reread those books several times, and every single time I'm like thinking I'm going to find something more within the work, and then I never do, so I do feel like it's time to pass them on to someone else. So there we have it. Those are the many books I decided to unhaul. Like I said, most of these will be up on Depop. Actually, I think all of them up on Depop or Vinted, whatever. Toronto Gloss obviously isn't yet, but it will be soon. If there's any of these books that you particularly want, let me know and I can reserve them for you, of course. Also, I do ship mostly within the UK, but I can ship internationally. The only thing is that you probably have quite high shipping fees, just because I don't want to lose money in like sending it to the US or wherever it may be going. But if you do particularly want one of these, like I said, let me know and I can put it aside for you. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you so much for being here. I've got a list of about 10 books, maybe a little bit longer than that I've recently brought into my life. So we're going to be having a book haul in the future. I think I'm pretty good at keeping on top of how much comes in, how much goes out, and how much I'm reading of the stuff I own. I definitely am focusing on my physical TBR more this year, and I really like that journey, kind of discovering gems on my shelves that I may have owned for several years. So anyway, love to you from here to wherever you may be in the world. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you'd like to stick around and see more from me, and I'll see you so soon for another video. Bye bye.